All right, so that's it. Let's move on to a couple problems. All right, so let's utilize everything we said. The first thing I told you was that when you have a 45, 45, 90 triangle, I showed you here when you have a 45, 45, 90 triangle, across from the 45, put a 1. Across from the other 45, put a 1. And at the hypotenuse, put a 2. All right, so let's do that. Across from this 45, the ratio is 1. Across from this 45, the ratio is 1. And across from the 90, the ratio is radical 2. Now, all you're going to do is solve for x, you're just going to set up a proportion. X over 1 is equal to 20 over radical 2. That's all I'm doing is setting up a proportion. X is to 1 as 20 is to radical 2. And you're going to cross multiply. You just cross multiply. You get radical 2x is equal to 20. Radical 2x is equal to 20. You divide by radical 2 on both sides. And notice what you get. You end up with x is equal to 20 over radical 2. Most textbooks don't want you to keep the radical 2 in the denominator, so let's do what we did up here. Let's multiply by 1. Radical 2 over radical 2, what you end up with is 20 radical 2. Radical 2 times radical 2, we talked about that earlier, that's 2. So your final answer here is 20 divided by 2, radical 2, which is 10 radical 2, final answer. 10 radical 2, final answer. Now, what this 1-to-1 ratio means is whatever x is, y is. This 1-to-1 ratio does not mean that x has to be 1. A 1-to-1 ratio means that if x is 1, y is 1. If x is 2, y is 2. If x is 3, y is 3. That's what a 1-to-1 ratio means. And in our case, if x is 10 radical 2, y is 10 radical 2. All right, so that's how you solve those trigonometric ratio problems. All right, so again, you have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. First thing I told you, when you have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, immediately identify the ratio. Across from the 30, see, notice how the smaller the angle, the smaller the side. The 30 is a small angle. Across from that, you have the smallest side. All right, so across from the 60, you've got the middle side. And across from the 90, 90 is the biggest angle, you've got the longest side. That'll help you memorize where these ratios should go. All right, so across from the 60, you've got the radical 3. Across from the 90, you've got the leg ratio 2. And across from the 30, you've got the leg ratio 1. So now all you're going to do is just set up a proportion. All right, set up a proportion. So you got 6 over 1. 6 over 1 is equal to x over radical 3. Set up a proportion, and you're going to cross multiply. You're going to get x is equal to 6 radical 3. Final answer for x. Final answer for x. Now for y, one of the things you're going to discover for y, a shortcut for y is to observe that this is a 1-to-2 ratio. This is a 1-to-2 ratio. A 1-to-2 ratio does not mean that this leg is 1 and this leg is 2. It does not mean that. What a 1-to-2 ratio means that if this is 1, if this is 2, that's 4. If this is 3, that's 6. Y is double this ratio. That's what that means. So if x for us is, or if this leg here is 6, if this leg here is 6, y is double that, which would be 12. All right, so that's sort of a shortcut approach there because I want to get through as many problems as we can. All right, so let's look at another problem. So we have 45, 45, 90. The ratios are 1 to 1 to radical 2. 1 to 1 to radical 2. All right, so now let's set up a proportion. 5 is to 1. 5 is to 1 as x are, this is a 1-to-1 ratio. So right away you can see that x is the same as that. That's quick and easy. Let's not spend a lot of time with that. So here we have 5 is to 1 as h is to radical 2. All right, so you're going to cross multiply. You're going to end up with h times 1 is h, is equal to 5 radical 2. Final answer. So you got x easy because this is a 1-to-1 ratio. Whatever this is, that is. All right, so let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's do one of these problems because these are sort of demanding. All right, so this is a 1-to-1 to radical 2 ratio. 1-to-1 to radical 2 ratio. You're going to set up a proportion. You get 6 radical 3 is to radical 2 is equal to, so 6 radical 3 is to radical 2 as x is to 1. All right, so you're going to cross multiply. You're going to cross multiply. You get 6 radical 3. 6 radical 3 is equal to radical 2 times x. You divide by radical 2. Divide by radical 2. And you're going to end up, let's finish it over here. You're going to end up with x is equal to, sorry about that. Man, you couldn't see any of that. Forgive me, I'm sorry. So you get 6 radical 3, 6 radical 3 over radical 2. Most problems won't want a radical in the denominator. Most problems won't want a radical in the denominator. So you multiply by 1, radical 2 over radical 2. You end up with 6 radical 6 over 2. Radical 2 times radical 2 is 2. And you're going to end up with 3 radical 6. 3 radical 6. Both x and y are 3 radical 6. All right? So I want to do one more problem. One more problem. The ratio here, that's a 1. Here, the ratio is radical 3. Here, the ratio is 2. All right? So let's do the problem. Let's set up a proportion. I want to do as many problems as we can to hopefully get as many problems as we can under your belt. You study it when you go to YouTube, and then it won't be as bad. All right? So here we go. So we have, let's solve for x first. So we have 2 radical 6 is to 1 as x is to radical 3. We cross multiply. Cross multiply. We end up with 2 radical 18 is equal to x. 2 radical 18 is equal to x. And you can simplify that. 2 times radical 9 radical 2. That radical 9 is 3, so you end up with 6 radical 2. X is equal to 6 radical 2. X is equal to 6 radical 2. Now, h, the way you'd solve for h is to set up another proportion. So you have radical 2, or you have 2, set up another proportion. So you have 2 radical 6. 2 radical 6 is to 1 is equal to h over 2. Cross multiply again. You're going to end up with h is equal to 4 radical 6. Final answer. All right, so I know that was a mouthful. But we live in a technological age. I want you effective probably as early as sometime this weekend. We'll put this on YouTube. And YouTube will give you the ability to pause it and stop it. All right, you can pause the tape and stop it. Move on to, you can study it. And then you can play it again. And that'll give you a chance to get through as many problems as we're doing tonight and in a short period of time that I'm allotted. There are some word problems that I want to go through as well that you can see on ACT tests or PSAT tests. Let's try to get through 2 problems in a minute and a half. Let's see if we can do that. So here we have a square. What is the area of the square if the diagonal is 3 radical 2? All right, what's if the diagonal is 3 radical 2, you know that that's 90. This is 45. That's 45. So you got a 45-90 triangle. So this diagonal is 3 radical 2. Let's try to find the area. All right, so you got a 1-to-1 to radical 2 ratio. We only got a minute left. 1-to-1 to radical 2 ratio. All right, so now you set up a proportion. All right, so what's this side here? So you have x over 1. X over 1 is equal to 3. You got radical 2 here, and you end up with 3 radical 2. You cross multiply, you end up with radical 2. X is equal to 3 radical 2. You divide by radical 2 on both sides, you get x is 3. Oh man, I'm doing a bad job of keeping the problem on the paper. Sorry about that. So x is 3. If x is 3, the area is 9. If x is 3, the area is 9.